I don't have a tremendous amount of insight to give, to be honest, because when I signed up to be a host for Machinima, I signed away my channel. And so I wasn't monetizing the entire time I was there. So like all these videos back then that had like millions of views or hundreds of thousands of views, like I didn't get a dime from that.
Welcome to Visionaries. I'm your host, Jacob Wolf. Twice a week, we welcome on some of the most successful and high-profile people in gaming and the internet to ask them how they do what they do. Today's guest is Shawn Hutchinson, known as Hutch, a successful gaming creator and businessman. Dubbed by some as YouTube's first online gaming superstar, Hutch's position in gaming is extremely unique. In 2008, he began uploading Call of Duty commentary videos to a then infantile YouTube. With both the site and the game's rise to popularity, Hutch rose with it. By 2009, millions of people were watching Hutch's videos. He then became a host in Machinima, then the de facto multi-channel network for gaming. But it wasn't all perfect. In April 2012, he walked away from Machinima and YouTube to focus on his mental health. He's since come back and maintains a healthy Twitch streaming presence, but rarely focuses on YouTube anymore. We wanted to have him on to talk about his legacy, the change he's seen in content creation, and where we're headed moving forward as an industry. Shawn Hutchinson, welcome to Visionaries. There's a statement in journalism that is called act like you have been there. And it's basically keep your cool around every single person you talk to. It's in the moment. I have interviewed Michael Phelps, I've interviewed Shaquille O'Neal, I've interviewed Mark Cuban, and many other people worth 1 million times my net worth. Always kept my cool. Never freaked out, nothing. But I did want to start this episode just by saying thank you. You saw in my tweet when I was promoting this that I said when I first started seeing your content, I was 12 years old. That is true. I'm 25 now. And I think that there's a whole generation of people, myself included, that got into gaming and had gaming content aspirations because of some of the work that you guys at Machinima were doing, especially on the Respawn side of things. And that was my case. I started learning how to video edit because of what you all were doing. And I couldn't afford an HD PVR. It was totally out of my budget being a poor kid. Yeah. But I did my best in Black Ops to like take those 30-second clips and build something out of them into, in Sony Vegas Pro. Yep. And that's
Did you pay for it? Be honest.
At the time, I did not. No. I now pay. I do pay for Premiere.
Yeah, me too.
And I've paid for Premiere for like 7 or 8 years now.
Premiere's better anyway, so
it definitely is better. And if I didn't also edit on PC and have a amazing PC, I would probably be a full-time Final Cut editor if I'm perfectly honest, because Premiere can be a little buggy sometimes. Anyway, so thank you. Thank you for inspiring a whole generation of people all those years ago.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. Somebody inspired me. So I got into making YouTube videos because I looked up Call of Duty vids on YouTube one day, just because I was getting into COD 2. And I found a very small but hardcore community of people that were trying to make gameplay videos with just like really exciting gameplay, very aggressive gameplay. And, Hector was in that scene at the time as well. And so... they inspired me, and then I just, everybody passes it along. So you'll do that for someone one day, and, one day you'll be sitting in this chair and then somebody will be interviewing you, I would assume.
Yeah, I've been there, and it is, it's flattering and also weird because I'm usually younger than the people that do that to me. I've inspired.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, aren't you 23 or
25? Yeah.
Okay.
But when I started at ESPN, I was 19. And so it's been quite the journey over the past 6.5 years since then.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anywho, so I wanted to dive into this and I wanted to bring you on because we've had a couple of different people on that have talked about sort of what I consider to be the birth of YouTube. We had Mike Darlington, the CEO of Monster Cat, which is one of the early music companies to really succeed on there. We had him on a week ago, and he was great. You were certainly, and Hector said this in an interview you did with him a couple of years ago for Eavesdrop. Basically said that you were one of the first gaming superstars on the platform. And I think that's probably a proper characterization if I'm remembering the numbers off the top of my head. So I want to ask how you got started in that, and then also when you found your kind of first success and virality.
So yeah, I got, just like I said a moment ago, I got started. This must have been it would have been in 2008, and it originally started as just a coping mechanism because the girl that I was with at the time cheated on me. Or no. This is before she cheated on me. This is before that. I was like upset because I think she had broken up with me over the phone when I had like 104-degree fever. It was just the worst kind of humiliation possible. And, I was not somebody of means at the time. So, you mentioned a moment ago not being able to afford a HD PVR. I mean, I couldn't even afford a Dazzle, but that didn't stop me from going to Best Buy and overdrawing my ATM card intentionally just so I could get one, and just like you said a moment ago, start my journey with just like, because I had no experience with editing whatsoever, and so I had to teach myself how to do that because I wanted to make these montages, and so I would look up these tutorials and as far as so that's how it started. I was trying to get over a girl, and it was just, there was no money in it. It was just something fun to do, and it was a lot of fun for me, and so I probably spent 12 to 14 hours a day capturing gameplay, editing, teaching myself how to edit, rendering videos, because back then the laptop that I was using was so awful that it took, I think, 10 hours for, a 5-minute HD video to render. And as far as the first instance of virality, it was, in retrospect, it was quite fast in terms of the growth, but that first year it was not. It was you're just kind of really clawing away for 1 or 2 subscribers every few days or something. Just kind of slowly building up views, start getting 500 views on a video. Like, holy shit, how many people can you fit in? That's a lot of people basically. And then that turns into 1,000 and then 2,000 and then 10,000. And what really kicked off for me was when Machinima reached out and offered me a contract to post on their channel. And they had just this massive platform at the time. I can't remember exactly how many subs they had when they signed me, but I believe it was in the neighborhood of 1 or 2 million, which was a lot back then. I mean, it's a lot now, but that was a lot back then. And the algorithm, the algorithm really was very kind to me in the beginning. So I owe a lot of my success to things that were just totally out of my control.
Back then, this is a time, I think it's maybe 2 years after the Google acquisition of YouTube. Very early on in the time of those two companies being together. And obviously Google, being as successful as it was, put a ton of marketing dollars behind YouTube to try to get more people in the door and for it to become the predominant video sharing website in the way that it is now. Describe to me what YouTube was like back then as a creator in the beginning.
It was just it was not, it was just a place where I don't know, there was a moment where it was kind of cool. There wasn't a lot of advertising, and it's a place where you would go to look up kind of stupid meme videos. There wasn't this, when you go to the platform now, for example, and you search something, the first 25, 30 results are going to be major corporations or big media companies or something like that. And it was not like that before. So I don't know exactly what the question was. What was it like back then? I mean, it was just
as a creator too, creating content in that sort of advertising boom.
It just felt like the wild west. I mean, it just felt like it just didn't feel like it does now. It's kind of intangible. It's hard to put it into words. I mean, some things are tangible, but the feeling was one of it was almost, I'm really struggling to put that into words. It was very, very different back then. Very, very, very different. I mean, even the communities were different, because this was before spam bots were really super prevalent. And so, this organic community that you could build on the platform back then, there was a good chance that all those people were real people. And as soon as people figured out that there was a ton of value in it, which didn't take too long, because I think I was able to look at the situation when it was happening, and I was able to recognize this has tremendous potential to be disruptive and change things. Because there's just no way you can get that many people watching your content and then people with money aren't going to want to come and advertise something. There's just no possible way. And so I think thinking about that, that was one of the reasons why I wasn't making any money on it in the beginning, but I put a lot of time into it, especially when the Machinima thing started, because I recognized like this could be something massive. In fact, it's very likely going to happen. But in the context, like YouTubers were not very well known in comparison.
So we talked a little bit on past episodes about multi-channel networks and what those were and what the value they were. I think that very few people though realize now, especially a younger generation of creators, that back then you actually couldn't monetize yourself on YouTube for a period of time there. You had to have like a middleman between you.
For gaming specifically.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there was, I remember like everyone from like broadband TV to like makers who went on to be a part of Disney, obviously, and now are sort of fully integrated. Machinima became the sort of end all be all for the gaming space. Can you describe very basically at the value that a multi-channel network offered a creator like yourself at the time?
I don't have a tremendous amount of insight to give, to be honest, because when I signed up to be a host for Machinima, I signed away my channel. And so I wasn't monetizing the entire time I was there. So like all these videos back then that had like millions of views or hundreds of thousands of views, like I didn't get a dime from that. And so I didn't really understand what the significance of an MCN was at the time. In fact, like there weren't a lot of options, like you said. Like Machinima was kind of the only game in town until the station came around, or the game station. And then that's when the kind of things started to get more competitive with different networks. But back then it was just like you didn't think about it. There wasn't like you didn't think about negotiating terms or anything. It was just like, you felt like it felt like, at least for me, I can only speak for myself. It felt like I was getting away with robbery. It felt like I was getting away with something. It felt wrong to get that much compensation and special treatment for this thing that I was doing compared to the life that I was living before, which was just, I was waiting tables and, an exceptional life, I think. So yeah.
You mentioned in that Eavesdrop pod that you were making probably about $35,000 on a good year waiting tables. What did it look like compensation?
Much lower than that. I don't know, about 30. Okay. Yeah, I think it was probably like 25,000, maybe 20,000. I didn't have a lot of money and I didn't have a lot of drive to do anything. But once I figured out that I was creative in that way, that's when it didn't really feel like work. I loved doing it, and then signing up and getting a job for Machinima as a host and learning from people like Sark and Hollywood, who were kind of mentoring me in a lot of ways, which is not a job that they really signed up for, but they kind of had to do it. I don't know if you want to get to that just yet, but yeah.
I was going to ask, actually now follow up on what you just said. Had you done anything creative, even like amateur as a teenager or anything else, whether it be like music or arts or anything of the sort?
Well, I mean, I think I was creative. Like I remember spending a lot of time in my head and keeping myself entertained with my imagination. I struggled a lot with my peers as a kid. I really, really struggled to connect with people my own age. And I was just, I was hyper social, but the way that I was social, it was a bit much. Like I was very hyper and kind of goofy and just sort of weird. And so, how did we get on that topic, by the way? I think I lost my train of thought a little bit there.
Oh no, I was asking because you said that you hadn't realized that you were creative in that way until you started making YouTube videos. Yeah.
So creatively, like when I was a kid, one of the ways that I coped with all that stuff was I had to figure out how to get people to like me, and so I focused really hard on trying to be as funny as possible. I sketched a lot. I especially liked drawing faces. I spent a lot of time doing that as a kid. And I got an award for drama class senior year of high school, but it was like nothing. That was just whatever. I wasn't in any plays or anything like that. It was just, I had fun, and I wasn't very shy when I would get up and like get in front of people. So
getting that Machinima contract, how far along were you into sort of your rise as a creator at that point?
It was I was still like in utero would be the best way to describe it there. Cause I think I had 10 to 20,000 subscribers when Machinima picked me up. I had built that up on my own, which honestly back then that was like hard to do that. I mean, and you have to post a lot and you have to really love what you're doing, I think, and you have to engage with your community, and, that was tough, but Yeah, it's a trip looking back and thinking back. But yeah, like I was right around 20,000 subscribers. And it really wasn't long after that it really started to pick up. Like once Machinima started posting those videos and those videos started to get hundreds of thousands and millions of views, I think it was less than a year. It was 100,000. And then it was just, from there, it was just the algorithm kind of took over.
I remember at the time talking to other friends that were Call of Duty players, and they were talking, they had sort of their favorites among all of you creators that were around back then, whether it be the Optic guys or, like Kex, etc., or Nanners or Sark, etc. Like it would be a discussion. And I think when I would talk to those people and your name would come up in the conversation, the drive was very like apparent, right? The sort of consistency of the videos that you were making, how frequently you were making them. I mean, I think there were periods you were almost hitting stuff like maybe even twice a day, but certainly every single day it felt like you had something.
On YouTube?
Yeah.
For like when I came, I mean, I'm not like super strict about posting a video a day. Like I got to be honest, I'm not about that grind life in a way that a lot of my peers are. Cause there have been times where I was super active. I don't know if I was ever like a daily poster for like an extended amount of time, but at the same time, we were doing daily videos on Respawn. So like we were like making content and putting in the work. But as far as my personal channel, I think I would do like every few days, but I loved it. And I feel like that was pretty obvious, that it was authentic excitement about games and about the time of my life that I was in, because it was just so kind of intoxicating in so many ways. And I was very honest about all that. But I realized that I'm not willing to sacrifice too much of my, like, you have to sacrifice a little bit, but I'm not willing to sacrifice too much when it comes to like the grind stuff. So if I'm not feeling it creatively or whatever, then I'll just give myself time off, and that's just how it is. So I've been able to do that, fortunate enough, and that's how I prefer to do it. And not everybody works that way.
Yeah, hold that thought. I want to come back to that later on, but I want to keep on the train that we're on at the moment. And so you mentioned Sark and Hollywood, and those guys came from G4, if I remember correctly. They were television guys, a very different G4 than what people know now, which is like a digital first property with some of the old creators, but certainly a whole different style. I think more recently they've pivoted to paying like Will Neff and a bunch of other creators to create skit shows, etc.
Is he doing G4 content?
He is, yeah.
Okay.
I've noticed in the past couple of weeks they launched like a persona where I don't even know how to describe it accurately. It's him dressed as a woman hosting a call-in show, which is interesting. But yeah, I think they started uploading that a couple years ago. Anywho, so G4 back then was very different. Things were focused on game reviews, etc. It was before all internet access was like widespread broadband. And something that Hector said in that eavesdrop interview, which I think is accurate and to my recollection, is you were one of those like very first digital first stars. You didn't come from television. You just kind of came up through the internet and boom, you were there. How do you think that rise and journey compared, and talking to Sark, talking to Hollywood, etc., and where do you think that you maybe had more skills than them in certain ways, but maybe deficiencies in other ways as well?
I think I was able to maybe like tap into what I got to be careful, because they were better than me at production and at every possible level. So let's just be clear about that. Like that was their job. That was their career. They had gone to school for it,
Yeah,
but
I think that's a deficiency, clearly, right? Like they're long-time television production people. We're a digital first creator, so yeah.
Well, so I think in some ways it did help me to like identify maybe like how like because the language of TV and the language of YouTube was like very different, and that remains to be the case. Although it's starting to change now, it's like way more brand safe on YouTube, but back then that wasn't the case. And so like the tiny minuscule amount that I was able to like contribute maybe tapped into that a bit, but they were very clearly not only like knowledgeable on how to produce videos and content and stuff like that. Sark, I'm talking about Sark now. He had this kind of magical charisma that you couldn't even really quantify. And so it was impossible to not learn a lot, I think, from them. I'd have to have been completely closed off, and thankfully I wasn't.
Yeah. So there is this sort of pop moment that is the release of Modern Warfare 2. YouTube sort of skyrockets through the moon at the same time as a video sharing service. This game comes out and it has probably the most popularity of any video game. I think it's still like massive in the sales charts even today.
It was the biggest games. At the time. It was the biggest entertainment launch of all time. It made $1 billion in the first weekend, which was just, I mean, that was crazy. So yeah.
So describe that pop as a creator, what that looked like, being there for that moment.
It was kind of manic. Like I don't know if I would say that I got manic, but you'd have to have a really solid foundation of like who you were, I think, to walk into a situation like that where all of a sudden you're inundated with all this like praise and, people are treating you like you're special. You have to have like a really solid foundation to not have that affect you. And so it just became my entire world. Like I existed in that place exclusively, in that sort of like internet place. And, I had a life and I have friends like that, but I was spending a lot of time like sitting at and staring at a screen and just watching the numbers go brr because it was hard not to look at it. And, figured out that you can't really do that for too long. You have to almost like tune it out. And so now I have sort of like the opposite approach where I just don't look at, I try to stick to just like using all the energy that I have to just trying to like be funny or entertaining on stream. And I just really try to push the rest to the side. And again, like not every creator does it this way. And I'm not saying that this is the best way. I'm just saying this is the way that after doing this now for 12 years, 13 years, I've just established these rules for myself to avoid pitfalls, I think.
Taking a quick break from this episode to have a word from our sponsors. The journey of my career has been pretty fast-paced. I started writing at 17, and within 16 months, I went from having never written a published article to landing a job at ESPN as their youngest talent hire ever. With that fast-paced career, I've often found myself struggling with imposter syndrome and with work-related anxiety. But over the past few years, seeing a therapist really helped me guide my way. And if you think you may be feeling depressed, stressed, anxious, and overwhelmed, then today's sponsor, BetterHelp, is here to help you. BetterHelp offers licensed therapists who are trained to listen and help you. Talk to your therapist in a private online environment whenever's convenient for you. And if you're like me, where it seems there's never enough time in the day, you understand how important that convenience is. There's a broad range of expertise in BetterHelp's 20,000 plus therapist network that gives you access to help that may not be available in your area. Finding a therapist can be hard, but BetterHelp simplifies that experience. You start by filling out a questionnaire to assess your specific needs, and within 48 hours, BetterHelp will match you with a therapist. From there, it's easy. Schedule video and phone sessions, message your therapist as much as you want, whenever you need to, and everything you share is completely confidential. You can request a new therapist at no additional charge anytime. I've been seeing my therapist Diane for 4 years now, and when we reflect back on the progress I've made in my life for the better, it's a pleasant reminder of why I started seeking help and the goals I had when we first started working together. Join the 3 million plus people who've taken charge of their mental health with an experienced BetterHelp therapist. Get your 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/visionaries. That's betterhelp.com/visionaries. You remind me a little bit of myself, and then also just a lot of other like hip hop artists and others that talk about this sort of maybe later in life. That slingshot from being standard lower middle class person to internet celebrity, highly successful, maybe not super wealthy, but certainly wealthy by comparison. How did you deal with this?
I don't know about
this. Well, even if
not
it's
not on the Machinima salary, not on the Machinima salary.
Right. I do want to ask about that in a second, but I do want to ask about the fame, because with that fame comes a lot of mental health struggles and everything else, like battling sort of wanting to be arrogant and confident in yourself, and finding that nice fine line between the two and everything else. Did you deal with any of that, the slingshot into celebrity?
Yeah, I mean, like, it's impossible for it to not go to your head, because I was going from a place where like I had no negotiating power with the Olive Garden. Like they offer you a wage.
Yeah.
And if you don't want it, you can fuck. Is this a brand safe?
No, you can do it. You can do it.
Okay.
I'll bleep
you
it
can
on
fuck
audio.
off.
Yeah.
Okay. You're going to bleep them, so I'll try to keep it minimum.
No, I'll bleep on audio, but in YouTube, it's fine.
Okay.
YouTube, it doesn't matter.
But, so to go from that and then, not instantaneously, but like once it became tangible, like it wasn't instantaneous because like I said, I built up that channel for like a year. But once that Machinima stuff kicked off and they offered me a job, my life was just, you could tell I was just, you're stepping into just this new chapter of your life. And along with that, like there was nobody to forge a path before me. Like this, I was like, not me, because there were people literally like YouTubers that came before me, but I mean like in many ways in terms of like the gaming space, like I was like tip of the spear. And so, I made many mistakes along the way and there wasn't really like a roadmap in front of me. So yeah, anyways.
All right, so now I want to talk about some of the other stuff because you mentioned the Machinima salary being low or alluded to that. You've talked about that a few different times. I encounter in some high frequency young gamers who are incredibly talented in whatever their respective game be. They're high on a ladder somewhere. They're starting to get their first offers. Yeah, correct. They're starting to get their first offers from esports teams who usually don't end up paying them by the end of it all. But they're sort of on that cusp of transitioning from like amateur to professional, and they deal with it really hard. When you got the Machinima offer, did you just take it on signing? Like, did you
immediately
anything else immediately?
Immediately, yeah, immediately. And like that was like the height of my popularity too. I mean, maybe like 2013, but really like 2010, 11. That was like we were on fire, and in 2009 too, late 2009. But they offered me. I'll just say it, but they offered me $40,000 the first year, which is hilarious when you think about it now.
How many subscribers did you have when you got the offer? Just out of curiosity?
Not very many. I was like, really, like it was, well, at that time it was like over 100,000, but it had only been like 6 or so months of successful videos and I had no production experience. So in my mind, their leverage made sense. I felt like they like got to dictate some things. And plus, like I said, just this literally was not a job before. And so, 40,000 is like not, compared to what I was probably worth at the time is like crazy good value that Machinima got. But you got to look at it in the context of my life. That was like double what I was making at Olive Garden. And it was a salary. And there was like all this freedom to just do whatever I wanted. And I thought that I had hit the jackpot. And it wasn't until like a couple years later that I started to get pissed. And I was like, wait a second, I feel exploited. It probably took me too long to figure that out. But yeah. But from their perspective though, like I kind of get it. And like, there's a part of it, like, I'm not like super pissed about it, to be honest. Like I don't dwell on the past too much as far as like that stuff goes. And they were really, like they were doing what they were, they were chasing their bottom line. So whatever.
Did that come with a stipulation that you were going to have to move out to Los Angeles? Or that's where you ended up being?
Yeah.
Right?
I moved from the Bay Area to LA. By myself, I didn't know anybody. I just came down here and then, that was...
What was that like, being in this new setting with a bunch of new colleagues and, yeah?
It was totally overwhelming. Like, I was like, according to, the people at the time, I was like the hot shit at the time, but I did not feel that way on the inside. On the inside, I felt totally vulnerable and insecure because I walked into the company and I thought about it, like going into it. I'm like, okay, what are these people probably going to think of me? These are people, I'm talking about people that worked on Machinima on the back end. These are people that had like 4-year college degrees. These are people that went to school for graphics, animation, for business, for editing, for whatever. I mean, like these are people that had worked really hard to get to where they were. And some of them were chasing sort of like a piece of like what I had at the time. And they were really putting their heart and soul, and they were making like really cool videos, and a lot of them were very successful with the series that they would do. But I put myself in their shoes. I'm like, I would not like me. I would be apprehensive of me if I was them. And so like I went into it sort of preparing to just like it felt like I was in grade school again. Like I have to win these people over. And so I just went out of my way to like be nice to everybody and be humble and be teachable. And it didn't take me very long, but after, maybe like 3, 4, 5 months, I was friendly with like most everybody. So, But in the beginning, it was totally overwhelming. And I felt at times almost paralyzed with panic because of the situations that they were putting me in on camera. And not that it was like bad, but it was just like new. I'd never had to deal with cameras and lights and people watching you and expecting you to be funny, like on the fly. And there was a lot of that was really difficult for me, I think.
Now, I remember seeing Anders at the time being very vocal about the experience being very different from what he was creating at home when he would come to visit you all for periods at a time and create that content before he was there sort of more regularly. But I remember him talking about the content that you all were creating, whether it be like more skit oriented or sort of what would now be IRL content in the, sort of Twitch era, which I want to come back to that in a second and how that's changed. But some of the stuff that wasn't just I'm dubbing my voice over the video game that I am playing and that I am good at. What was it like adjusting to that you just described a little bit there? And, how different was the content? What kind of stuff were you all creating at the time for people kind of unfamiliar, since some of that stuff is now completely gone?
It was just like apples and oranges. Cause like when I was at my apartment, my content was just, okay, I'd play the game for like 4 or 5 hours, hopefully get 4 or 5 games of TDM banked. And then, this was like right when podcasts were starting to become a thing. And like, I listened to a lot of like Joe Rogan back then. And, like that, I think it's funny to say because like these days I'm not like the biggest fan of him, but, he influenced me in many ways and he influenced a lot of people. But yeah, that was just something like I had seen at the time. A lot of people were making videos that were like, hey, here's the M16, these are the best attachments, or, like this is, they were making these videos to give people tips on the game. And I thought, not that was boring, but I thought like we could take this like further and like turn it into like a personality driven thing. And I was at the time, like, I'm still this way a little bit, but I think I've calmed down a little bit. I was like very loud and boisterous, and I just had a lot of energy, and so, going from that, which is like this private experience in my apartment, like no one's watching me, judging me or anything. I'm just there, just kind of like sharing my thoughts into a microphone about like, I went to the dentist today and it sucked, and like whatever. And just whatever popped into my head was good enough to just riff about at the time. And for whatever reason, it just connected with these viewers that were going to YouTube and searching Modern Warfare or whatever. And then when I went into the Machinima Respawn offices to shoot stuff, it was just you could tell it's like a production. It's like completely different vibe, and other people are relying on you to do your job, and so there's this pressure there that just is completely non-existent compared to the kind of content that you're making at home. And I struggle with that, and I think Adam probably struggled with that a little bit too, because our personalities, I don't think quite 100% were suited to be hosts, and we didn't know that yet. And it took us a couple years of doing it before we realized that we needed to branch off and do our own thing. Him being first and kind of like showing me that it could be done, and then me following up a few months later. Yeah.
What would you say was the peak of that time? What was the moment that you realized, whether it be a specific video or a specific event that you all went to? Because I remember some of the COD XPs you guys were at that you were kind of swarmed. And everybody sort of engrossed with what you all were doing. What would you say was the peak that you realized, holy shit, look at us, like, look at this?
It was like right away, I think. I peaked like real early. When in terms of like Machinima, my experience with Machinima, as soon as I got there, it was like I hadn't done much traveling in my life at the time, because as I said, I didn't have a lot of money, and so if you want to travel, it costs money.
Sure.
And within the first year, I was going to Dallas and Seattle and Cologne, Germany, and eventually I would travel to New York, and because of the job I ended up in like England, Australia, New Zealand. And so getting there right away, and then like figuring out that Sark and I had like good chemistry was really reassuring, because it was like the first day, as soon as they pointed the camera at us, we just started like, a lot of that was like totally improv, which is whatever. A lot of it was super lowbrow humor, but we didn't really, we would have like a loose outline of kind of like the idea of what we wanted to do. And then a lot of it was just really on the fly. And the fact that him and I were able to do that so easily together, that was like, okay, I'm definitely supposed to be here right now.
Yeah. Why do you think the content resonated so successfully, especially the non-gaming content, the ones where you're not playing video games all the time?
I think at the time, this was 2008, 2009. So like, I think at the time there was an appetite for content that wasn't served up from like big multinational corporations. And there was just this kind of like, I don't want to use the word hope and sound too lofty, but like having these platforms emerge where the users themselves could make the content, it represented like a shift away from like, it was like a rejection of, I think, in large part, it was just a rejection of sort of like the established way that we watched videos. And so part of the goal back then was just like push it as far as we possibly can. And so we did like a lot of edgy humor, but this was also during the time of like, South Park was obviously huge and Chappelle's Show was still like infamous. And so that was kind of the trend back then, was just to like, buck tradition and just like push it as far as you can go. And then like, as I've evolved, my priorities have obviously shifted and I don't feel this pressure to like push it that far. But at the time, that's where a lot of our motivation came from. Like, let's do it because we can, because like no one's telling us not to, and because millions of people are watching it. So let's just give them a show and just get really weird with it, I guess.
It's almost like this internet counterculture. I think that's saying to an audience who was discovering the internet at the time. I remember talking to a lot of friends, some older than me, some younger, who are sort of later millennial and early Zoomers, that, it's not like we might remember some, but don't distinctly remember the time of the early internet, right? Where your DSL not even DSL, dial-up. And I do actually remember a dial-up tone, which
I remember all that very distinctly, by the way.
Yeah, you're older than I am. You're older than I am. But I would say sort of your audience is maybe a little bit closer to my age, slightly older, maybe, but certainly in that sort of teen time at the time. But I do remember a dial-up sound in my grandmother's house. And I think that it was this time where it's like, we're not in that group of people who were discovering the internet through that, learning how to send emails, etc. We are discovering the internet through things like YouTube, through things like eventually Twitter and Facebook and the social media networks that are just kind of bubbling up all around us at that period of time.
Yeah.
And I had never thought about it that way, that it was sort of like almost like a counterculture to just, out with all the establishment stuff. Like, let's go. I think
that's
here.
A huge part of it for us back then. Was this is brand new, and I think people have wanted to like push it this far for a really long time, but then you have all these natural constraints with big money interests in television and film, so you can only push it too far, really. And so just the very idea that we could do it and like no one could stop us from doing it was very appealing, and it made us feel powerful, I think.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. Before we go further, I just want to call out, and the tweet is pinned at the top of the space. If you want to submit questions for Hutch here, and I know some people already have, use hashtag Visionaries podcast in your tweet. My staff will reach out to you and message you about coming up at the end of the show. And then we can give you speaker permission so you can ask Hutch a question of your own. Okay, so dive back in here. So something I want to talk about, you walking away. I know that you've spoken at pretty good length about sort of being unhappy with compensation. You've alluded to that here a couple of different times.
That wasn't why I left Machinima, by the way. But yeah, keep going.
Yeah, I know it's not, but I want to ask about sort of the mental health part of that journey and just like sort of taking the decision to walk away and try this by yourself.
Yeah. Just generally elaborate on that?
Yeah, go for it.
Like I mentioned before, I think it took me working a couple of years as an on-camera host for, a company, and I didn't really get to like dictate things creatively 100%. I think it took going through that experience to realize that I was not cut out for that kind of a job. And I have a whole new level of respect for hosts as well. Like I never thought about the effort that goes into hosting and how all these people that make it look really easy. Well, that's the reason why they're on camera, is because they make it look easy. It's incredibly difficult. And I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. It felt like I didn't have a choice. Like when I left Machinima, it felt like I am barely sleeping. My appetite is totally destroyed. I can't afford to lose any more weight. I'm a thin guy and I probably lost weight. And I mean, I was just physically really unwell. And we could go into the reasons for that. I mean, they're numerous, I think, and probably better for like my therapist. But, there were a lot of reasons why I was not happy at the time. And my mental health and my general well-being was just way too important for me to just ignore it. It felt like there was this like sense of urgency, like you need to act now because you can't, you just can't do this much longer. And I felt really shitty too, because a lot of people were envious of me, I think, at the time. And I felt guilty for walking away from that. And I imagined there were a lot of like imaginary voices in my head, like criticizing me, like, what could you want for? Like, what's your problem? Why aren't you just happy? But I was not happy. I couldn't ignore it any longer. And so I walked away for 6 months and I came back, when I felt like I was ready, and then promptly got eloped in Vegas and started acting super impulsively, like almost self-destructed. And yeah, I mean, there's like all kinds of like lessons that I've learned along the way, and hopefully like other creators don't have to learn it the hard way like I did. Hopefully they can draw some lessons from other people's mistakes. And so that's why I think it's important to just like talk about these things openly. There's a lot of grind culture especially with streaming, and everyone I know that grinds that hard has burned out at some point, and it's really not fun. It's brutal, I think. Totally brutal. It's just one day you wake up and you just feel like you have no gas in the tank and you have nothing to say, and you have all these other voices in your head that are projecting what you think other people are thinking, like they don't think you're funny anymore. And it's just a spiral after that. And I don't think that I think I probably struggle with this stuff a little bit more than like your average person. I'm maybe a little bit more sensitive. But I just couldn't ignore it. And so I chose to take care of myself. And, when I feel even slightly like that's coming on now, I will take 3, 4, 5 days off, whatever. I can do that. So I'm fortunate enough to do that. And so that's how I choose to do it. And, I would encourage people that are like feeling like that burn to, if they have the means to do so, to like really, you don't have to chase it that hard every single day. You can slow down and just like go to the beach and put your phone down and just like listen to the waves, or you just really need to quiet your mind sometimes. Yeah.
That guilt you described is something that I've personally felt, and I think it's tough, and I think it's important to talk about simply because most people, they are like, envious or whatever you have, but it's not all sunshines and rainbows. What they're seeing on camera with you and Sark and Adam and Hollywood, etc. Like, that looks like the life, but it may not be behind it. And I felt that a lot. Like my last 18 months at ESPN, I was miserable. I had a manager that was publicly embarrassing me in front of colleagues at certain events, and sort of brutal. Continually punching down, etc. And like had reported it to HR, it didn't get dealt with, and I was just so miserable to the point where like every day I was calling my agent and my mom to just like bitch at both of them, basically counting the days until it could be over. And I would say like being laid off from that company is one of the greatest days of my life. It was freeing in a certain type of way. And so I think that guilt is really important for people to hear about, because, what else do you want, right? Like you have this grand life on the camera, and but it's not all that behind the scenes. And it deteriorates all of us in certain ways.
And it's tough too when you're going through something like that and your job is to make like daily content, because then it kind of bleeds into your content a little bit. And I think there have been times where I sort of overshared before I was ready to before I had processed stuff. And so, I think it is important to speak really openly about this stuff, to talk about, the things that we struggle with as creators, not to do like a pity party kind of thing, but I think at this point, viewers are a little bit more wise to the fact that, you can really make yourself sick doing this content thing. We've seen people, I think there's a creator today and yesterday that is clearly in a psychotic state, and they're like on Twitter and stuff. And so I think there's a way to do it that's helpful, maybe a way that's not helpful, but I do think it's important to be transparent about these kinds of things, because I mean, it can be really insipid. I think it can be really, it can sneak up on you, like the bad side to it, and the negative feelings that it can stir up in you.
Yeah, I think I want to transition to what life was like after that moment, and sort of when you came back. One thing that certainly changed, and now it's a part of kind of a lot of what you do, clearly, based off watching your current content, is streaming. Twitch didn't launch until 2011. It was bought by Amazon in 2014, and it took off very rapidly in the year time. And Justin TV predated it, but certainly not to the level of eyeballs and fame. You're now a very active Twitch creator, and I watch your streams from time to time. I want to ask about how that changed what you were doing and the pace at what you were doing compared to that YouTube grind, and the financial part of it too, because I was listening to the Eavesdrop pod and you guys talked about $2.5 CPM or $2.50 CPM, which is nothing compared to what's out there elsewhere in other means of content. So yeah.
I mean, can you be more specific with the question again?
I want to talk about how like streaming and everything else changed it, and both from like a pace and a financial perspective.
Well, when I came back from that break, it was like starting over and kind of starting fresh, because I knew that I couldn't do what I was doing before. And so like it took me like 3-4 years after coming back before I finally like got into a rhythm. And then I met my fiance Esme, and that has been a huge source of stability for my life, which, a large part, I think, of my adult life has been marked with like chaos and instability. And so having this relationship with her has been like it calmed me down. Like I'm just not the same person. But for the first little bit, it was like very chaotic. I struggled a bit. Like being accountable only to myself is great because there's so much freedom, but I also struggle with that because there's no one holding me accountable but me. And to a lesser extent, maybe Esme now, because if I fuck around too much, she will notice and say something probably. But so that's been that. The last like 7 years or so has been like my process of sort of figuring out how to do this on my terms without it making me miserable. And I think for the most part, I've done a pretty good job of that, but it's cycles like everything else. There's like ebb and flow and ups and downs, and you just got to adapt and roll with it.
Has streaming made it easier though to sort of, cause it's a little bit, I would say streaming's difficult. I don't want to make it sound like it's not, but it's a little bit different of an effort than video creation. Video creation is very intense. Has streaming made it a little bit easier to work up that balance?
I would say so, yeah. It's just when you have chat to bounce off of, it's easier to like be creative and direct the conversation in a way that's like funny or entertaining or informative. And on YouTube, I just felt like YouTube was just very volatile. Like it was changing so much so fast right around like 2012, 2013. And it's still to this day, to me, it became a really unreliable platform. That's not everybody's story. Some people find tremendous amount of success, and I think there's a lot of new opportunities right now with shorts to get eyeballs on your channel. But for now, I'm not really posting on YouTube. But in the future, that could change. Who knows? If I find something sustainable, and something I was interested in doing and it was like received well, then I would go back and be active in that way. But I would say that streaming probably takes up more time, but it takes up less energy because you have that chat to bounce off of.
So maybe this is just my point of view, but I want to get your thoughts on this. The period in sort of Twitch's sort of, rise to popularity, 2014, 2015, that Amazon acquisition time where things just kind of shot over to the moon, and this, it overtook CNN and viewing hours every single month. Like it really kind of just hit the wave. So much of the content at that time on Twitch became what seems solely focused on the game. A lot of esports competitions, a lot of other things. It just like game, right? Like performance game. We now sort of see a rebound to the other direction. And I actually think it's a little bit closer to what you guys were doing back in 2009 and 2010 and 2011. With
yeah, sort of like
shows.
random sketches and yeah, people are getting really creative with it. Like the Ludwig crew, like all those guys, like yeah, they're getting crazy creative with it, and they're getting like big money from these platforms to like throw these events. So, you know, the production value is through the roof. But yeah, I did notice that actually. And I think it's probably for the better. I don't know. Like they're tremendously popular, so they must be doing something right.
Yeah, it's just really interesting. I mean, so many of the, we had Atriarch on this show a few weeks ago, who's is sort of in that crew of people. He's best friends with Ludwig, and he started really aggressively during the pandemic while stuck inside creating content. And a lot of the content that he's found to be successful is like, he has a Marketing Monday show that's basically just him sitting on Twitch, like giving marketing advice, because that's his background. He works at NVIDIA full time, while also being a very cool, high profile creator now. But then also like Maya Higa was here, and she's not a gamer, but she's sort of in that same circle of people, and she uses Twitch as means to like help fundraise for her bird sanctuary where she's taking care of endangered species. Like there's so many, the content is so different. Like it's all rooted in gaming at its very core. It's all tied to gaming in some sort of way because Twitch is a gaming platform. But it feels like everybody has just changed. There's been a sort of a tectonic shift over the past at least 2 years, but probably even 3, away from I play video games all the time to I'm now a lifestyle creator is probably the way I would describe it.
Well, I think it's easy to lose perspective and forget how different things were just 10 years ago. And the times that we're living in right now, there's just this exponential shift occurring on so many different levels, not just like video games, but just like in the world. And we've all just become, for example, accustomed to like spending a lot of time staring at our phones. But when the iPhone first came out, I remember people like being critical of people that spent too much time looking at their phones. So the fact that culture is changing so much, so fast is it's scary and exciting, but mostly exciting, I think.
Yeah. I want to open the floor in a little bit to audience questions, but I want to ask you one thing because you were talking about this in regards to your fiance. 2-part question. We'll start with the first one. Is your fiance from the gaming space, or did you all meet somehow otherwise?
Yeah, I met her when she was working at Machinima, actually. Very briefly, I met her, and then we reconnected when she moved to the Bay Area to get a job for IGN, and now she works for an ad agency that works with influencers and gaming brands and stuff like that. So yeah, she's in the industry. She helps me on the back end with stuff sometimes too, which is really helpful because like her job is like part of her job is literally like contract negotiation with influencers, and so she kind of like she's been tremendously helpful to me.
And where I was leading with that question was to ask about the people that keep you grounded. Because I understand this. Like I very much cling to the people in my life who it doesn't matter the success that I've had in my career. They just want to be around me, right? Like my girlfriend's family we've been together for 6 years. Like her family doesn't care. I go down there and I'm just me, just Jacob that likes to hang out or whatever. It's incredibly humbling. And I want to ask about that experience with you and finding those people in your life and being able to connect to those people and not just be Hutch the creator, but just be Sean Hutchinson.
So like good friends, family. I mean, it's not, I think those are going to be like the obvious answer, but like my family keeps me super anchored. And it helped too. It helped with my ego because as I was spending, I moved down to LA and my ego was getting real big and everybody was treating me like a rock star. And then I would go up there and like they were aware of what I was doing down in LA, but I don't think they were fully aware of like how big it had gotten at the time. And so when I would go up there, they're not treating me special. I'm just like the same person. And I think you need those relationships. I think you need those relationships because like the bigger my ego got, the more alienated I got. And so like a lot of those relationships became, they weren't things that I prioritized or took care of, and I lost contact with a lot of people. And then before you know it, I felt like even though I was getting all this attention and had all these viewers and subscribers and people telling me, you matter. Like it didn't feel like that. I didn't feel like I had anyone. I felt totally alone. And so that was one of the lessons that I did learn like through my journey through content creation is that you should really like make an effort to maintain the relationships that you have with people that, preceded your rise on social media and seek those people out and keep them close. Because if you only surround yourself with people that are like trying to be your friend because they want to maybe siphon off some popularity or exploit you in some other way, then I guarantee you're going to feel lonely at some point doing that for too long. So yeah.
So tough. And people are good at putting on a mask too and acting like they're there for other reasons.
I mean, it kind of comes with the territory. So like that was tough for me in the beginning too, because it was just not my world, this kind of cutthroat stuff. I am not cut out for that at all. That's just not, I don't work that way at all. So, that was an adjustment. Yeah. Anyways.
So we're going to start with audience questions. We've got a couple good ones. I had a friend of mine who's a reporter at the Sports Business Journal, Hunter Cook, goes by Diamondback GG, who all of you should go read his work. It's really insightful in certain different ways, especially about the esports community. He's not here in the space at the moment, but he submitted this question earlier in the day and asked if I could read it, which is, how has the high-profile failure of Machinima informed current creator collectives and their relationship with management from your perspective?
Wow, there's so many lessons. I think that like so many mistakes that Machinima made that I think like first and foremost, like the Machinima strategy back then was just like take over everything. Partner every channel that you can possibly partner. It doesn't matter if it's not profitable. It doesn't matter if we take a loss. The whole idea was like just to build this empire that became so big that it couldn't fail, I think was what the logic was. Obviously, I was not in like high level executive meetings at Machinima and was not privy to their thought process whatsoever. But it became quite clear after doing that for a couple of years, but that was, not sustainable. And then, of course, I think Machinima, they taught people valuable lessons about your value as a creator. It's like trying to lock people into contracts in perpetuity forever. It was something that they could get away with in the beginning, but it didn't last because people got pissed. And so that was another lesson. I think like people had an influence because they voiced their anger and they had a voice, and they were able to do that on social media in ways that they weren't able to do that before. But I think that was like probably the big lesson was that it's not going to work in the long run for a media company to just like hemorrhage cash as they're trying to build a multi-channel network. It just doesn't work. But they didn't know that at the time. They were just chasing it.
Yeah, well, all the MCNs are gone now for the most part, so I think your answer is correct. It's a bygone part of YouTube in general.
Yeah, it's hard to say. Maybe that was probably inevitable, or maybe Machinima just like colossally fucked up and they could have done better. But I tend to think that was probably inevitable.
It was basically, I think, the minute that the partner program unlocked and you didn't have to have the middleman, and YouTube got smart and hired what are more or less artists and repertoire people, A&R people, to go deal with creators. Like, yeah, that's the minute it was over.
It became a gold rush. And so like all these different MCNs were trying to compete with each other to give creators and then it set these standards that creators got used to for a couple years. And then when those standards went away, it was like, oh shit, it was like kind of a panicky moment, I think, for a lot of people. But that's another thing too. If you're going to do this kind of job, you need to be prepared for like extreme volatility. It's really rare to have creators that are just consistently successful the whole time. And for, every other creator that I know, like every single one of them, it's more like this. And it's tough, emotionally tough. You have to figure out like how much time you want to spend thinking about it. You have to like set limits. Just be prepared. Like it's not just going to be the steady line up. It's a really volatile thing to do for a living, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Never easy. Okay, so next question is going to be from Christopher Laporte, return caller. Chris was here during the Harris Peskin and Devin Nash episode. So Chris, we're going to invite you to speak. Feel free to come up and ask your question. And this would be the time to drop your phone, by the way. Hutch.
To turn up my phone?
Yes.
Oh. Did he speak? I didn't hear it.
Nope, go for it.
Right here. Everything cool. Thanks again, Jacob, for a great show. And Hutch, congratulations for surviving the gauntlet that is Las Vegas and your latest endeavor with Pine Park. So my question revolves around the normalization of cannabis. So we experienced, the normalization of esports through Twitch. With the limitations of advertising in the cannabis space, do you see Twitch and or YouTube as viable content marketing arms, or are they just as precarious as other social media platforms?
Certainly Twitch more than YouTube. Twitch's policy is that if it's legal in the state or province or country that you live in and you're not doing anything to put yourself in danger, you can smoke marijuana on stream. You can smoke cannabis on stream. And as soon as they had that policy, it was really important for me to start doing that right away. And it's not just because I like getting high, but I do like getting high. I think it's important to destigmatize cannabis. I think it's really, really important. I think there's less urgency now because I think it's polling says that 2 out of 3 people in this country think it should be fully legal, no questions asked. So maybe that urgency isn't there. But at the time, like, again, a lot has changed in the last 8 years, really. Like, we're having conversations that weren't even possible before. But I don't know if YouTube will ever come around on that. Like, I kind of doubt it. But Twitch has been a place where, you know, you can smoke weed, you can ingest cannabis however you ingest it, and they're not gonna take your channel away. And I do think it's important. I think the stigma around this drug is fucking ridiculous. I've been a witness to it now. I'm almost 40 years old. I'm 39 years old. So I've seen what they said about cannabis in the 80s and the 90s and how ridiculous and stupid it was, and how those attitudes persisted even well past like the end of like the DARE program or whatever. So, you know, there's still a little bit work to done. I do feel encouraged. I do think we're on a path towards legalization. I view it as being inevitable. The question is, you know, can we get that done in the next 20 years? I don't know. We'll see, but that's where we're headed. And I think it's important so if you consume cannabis, if you enjoy it, if you want it to be a part of your brand, I think you should do that, but you definitely need to be careful because a lot of these platforms will ban you. Like Instagram, I think will ban you for that stuff. YouTube, you can't monetize, which is a huge bummer, obviously, for like Pine Park. We're starting this YouTube channel and it's been doing like really successful, but we can't really monetize it. And so hopefully that changes. Honestly, I don't think it will until there's like federal legalization. I don't think YouTube would change that policy.
Good answer. Okay, so we'll end out on this question from We Killed It. God. Is this person loud? What's the...
You're taking a risk bringing him on, but go ahead. This is like a viewer of mine.
Okay. I hope good.
Okay. Let's do this. Is he there? I can't hear him.
He was invited. Has not accepted the invite yet.
Probably better to pick someone else. I think he'll probably troll you if he comes in. I think he will.
All right, here he is.
Oh.
Hey, Hutch. Long time, no talk. Just wanted to let everybody here know, or I guess I want you to explain.
Be prepared to hang up on him, by the way. He lies. Don't believe his...
Aquaman is better than Lord of the Rings. I mean, I feel like the people of America need to know outside of your Twitch chat. Thank you very much.
Okay, so first of all, I never said that Aquaman is better than Lord of the Rings. That's ridiculous. What I said was that the climactic battle at the end of Aquaman, the scale of it was on the level of Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers. I stand by what I said. I'm not saying it's better than Lord of the Rings. And yes, I'm devastated that it got pushed to 2023. I'm devastated. I'm gutted.
That's especially bold right now, considering there's a Amazon Prime Lord of the Rings show soon to be out, and I feel like the fan base is revitalized at the moment.
We're doing me and Bruce Green, my pal. We're gonna watch all 3 Lord of the Rings films on Saturday. We're gonna do watch parties on Twitch. So if anybody wants to join us, then check out Hutch on Twitch and Bruce Green.
I'm free this weekend, so I may have to join in that. I'm a big Lotar fan myself, so yeah.
Oh, it's gonna be a good time.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sean. I appreciate you joining us. Great discussion. For everybody in the space, if this was your first time, or if you came in the middle of the podcast and want to hear all of it in its entirety, you can find the Visionaries podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Just search Visionaries with Jacob Wolf. It's on all the other platforms as well. It will be up tomorrow morning. And then on Wednesday, today is Wednesday. On Friday, the video will be up on our YouTube channel as well, which is youtube.com/overcomegg. Thank you again for joining us, and have a good evening, everyone.
Thanks for having me on.
That's all for our show. If you enjoyed this episode of Visionaries, please leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcasts. It's a big help to the show. If you're new to the show, you can also find past episodes too, like our interviews with creators Atrioc, Maya Higa, and Devin Nash there as well. Special thanks to Sammy Daig and Prem Thotamkara for helping with this episode. We'll see you on Tuesday.